because for a team like the Suns, they don't have variable contracts. They don't have extensions that are tied to the cap sitting on there that they're waiting to kick in. Their books are pretty clean as far as they're all knowns. We know what those numbers are going to be. So anything it goes up by, that just increases their flexibility around the tax and the aprons.
The NBA trade deadline's passed and the Phoenix Suns made moves on the margin with Jusuf Nurkic. But what does it mean for the offseason? Because that seems like what the Suns are looking ahead to for any major moves. Got to bring in my guy, Keith Smith, a contributor to Spotrac and Front Office Sports Show. Glad to have you, Keith. How was your trade deadline?
Hectic, busy, crazy for over like a week long, but it was awesome. I've been a fan of the game for a very, very long time. I'm old and washed, so a very long time. And then been doing this covering the league for a while too. This is the craziest trade deadline I can ever remember. Volume of moves, volume of players moved, but mostly the types of players that got moved around. I mean, absolutely crazy.
Well, the volume of players moved and the types of players moved in Phoenix was minimal. They got rid of a disgruntled center, but there's a lot of questions about what does it mean for the second apron going into the offseason. Now, you're a master of the spreadsheet, a whiz when it comes to understanding the second apron stuff. Can you kind of explain the implications of what the Suns did?
Yeah, so what the Suns did, to keep it very simple and not lose a bunch of people and a whole bunch of numbers, they got rid of $19 million. It didn't take any guaranteed money back onto the books. If all goes wrong, they could move on from Cody Martin, Vasily Micic, and Nick Richards, and then they're in a position where they're going to get they could put themselves underneath the second apron and within room of a move or two of maybe getting under the first apron as well. Now, they'd have a lot of roster spots to fill out, so that's where it gets a little sideways. You don't want to get too crazy with, oh my gosh, look at all this great flexibility. But they are in a position where they could put themselves in range, and we saw a handful of teams do things like that. But even if those guys do work out and they're there, I kind of Micic is the one I think most likely to probably be gone. You're still in a spot where they're within a trade or two of getting under the second apron. And then that would, clearly, I think as Suns fans know now, would free up quite a bit of flexibility moving forward.
So in that kind of flexibility, whether it's obviously there's tiers to it, if you get in that first apron or if you get under the tax in general, does that open up things in terms of if you're looking to move on from a Kevin Durant, does that kind of change the equation there? And could that be part of the thinking as they evaluate this roster and try to figure out what the path for the future is?
Yeah, I think when I look at the Suns moves in kind of totality, because I'll take it back to the Richards trade, because that's, even though that's a little older, it's all part of the same thing. I think what it was we want to create flexibility while also not just taking in guys, right? Richards is good. Cody Martin should be helpful, but we'll see. They've got a lot of wings already. But those are guys that can actually play and help. So I think what they did was you achieved a twofold, right? You got rid of a guy you didn't want that wasn't going to play, that made a lot of money, and you brought in three guys that, we'll see what happens, with them. But to your point is, if they are going to move Kevin Durant or just do anything, this offseason, you want to have that flexibility. If you can get under the second apron, pre-Durant trade or in a Durant trade, that just frees up the options you can do in that trade. They might be able to, let's say it was, hey, we're going to move KD, but we also want to get off Grayson Allen's contract too. You could do that. You could put them together, which in today's world as a second apron team, I know I'm not telling Suns fans anything they don't know. You can't aggregate contracts going out and all the things that go along with this. So they've now put themselves within range for that to be a very viable thing that could happen versus, well, maybe if we, could make 7-8 moves, we could get there. Now we're in a position where that could be a very reasonable thing to see come this offseason.
How much does the increase in the cap going into next year, depending on what that is, impact this as well? Because there will be higher numbers for that second apron and first apron as well, right? So
Yeah.
that creates additional flexibility. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Whatever the cap goes up by, the aprons go up by the same amount. We are all kind of collectively pricing in 10 million as the increase because we all know the TV deal is coming in, or let me rephrase because the NBA gets angry when we say TV media rights deal because it was more than just TV, right? Because it's the world we live in. But we're in a spot where I think now what you see with the cap and the aprons is they're all going to go up 10% next season. That creates a lot more wiggle room. That's going to help because for a team like the Suns, they don't have variable contracts. They don't have extensions that are tied to the cap sitting on there that they're waiting to kick in. Their books are pretty clean as far as they're all knowns. We know what those numbers are going to be. So anything it goes up by, that just increases their flexibility around the tax and the aprons.
So is it 10% baked in, or is there a chance that it's more based on the influx
Great
of
question.
that media rights deal?
So in the CBA, they capped it at 10%. Um, no one wanted another 2016 where all of a sudden the only guys who ever benefited were the guys who were free agents that one year because the cap exploded that year. They did not want that. I've been told if they did not price it in and it all hit next year, it could have been as much as like 30 to 40% growth.
Wow.
And that would have been crazy. It would have just put things way out of whack. And then who knows where it would have been on the out years. So what they did was they capped the cap at 10% and said no more than 10% growth. And then let's say it should have gone up, let's say 30%. That extra 10% goes into next year's and it just keeps spilling over until you get caught up. That is one of the kind of learnings when that was proposed by the NBA. So for the 2016 season for that CBA, the NBA and the NBPA did not have as good a working relationship. And it was like, what are you trying to pull over on us? No way, that's not happening. You're just trying to hurt our players. Having worked through things like a global pandemic and all that, they now have a much better relationship. And it was, hey, just work with us. This is not good for the teams. It's not good for the players because it's going to benefit one free agent class. Guys who are free agents the next year are not going to get the money. It's going to cause a major mess. So 10% is the most it can go up in any given season. It also can't go down. That's the other thing to know now too. So which is good in case things got really sideways on us in the future.
So there was a lot of talk about how this current CBA and this apron system was going to maybe stifle trades. How shocked were you with how much movement actually happened, including big names? Because even from a Suns perspective, I know they didn't complete anything, but there was a lot of talk about bigger deals when we were led to believe that that may not be the case because of these rules.
Yeah, I was not surprised. I always say one of my favorite movies, the original Jurassic Park. Life finds a way, right? NBA GMs find a way. They're creative. They employ a lot of people to be creative with them. So they really do what they need to make things happen. And you saw that all over the league with all kinds of creativity with pulling in extra teams and using exceptions. And even if we go all the way back to the Karl Anthony Towns trade, the whole idea of, well, let's sign and trade these guys, but we're going to give them all $1 more so we can get around the stacking minimums rule in the offseason. There's a lot of creativity in this league. The other thing is just as kind of an anecdotal story. I was right down the road from y'all at the Arizona State College of Law for their mock trade deadline. Hundreds of super bright college students came in and they all operated NBA teams and they made, I think it was 43 trades in a 6-hour period.
Wow.
That involved massive mega salaries. People like myself and Eric Pincus and other people who really know the cap were there checking all these trades for legality. They all met. And I left there saying, along with a lot of the NBA personnel that were there to meet these kids and see what they did, we all left saying, well, if a couple hundred college students can figure it out, the guys who are getting paid a lot of money should be able to figure it out too. So that really affirmed for me that things were going to happen. And I'll say this too, this is going to carry over into the summertime. After all this maneuvering that happened, we have one team, the Brooklyn Nets, projects to have cap space this summer. Every other team projects to be over the cap. When we have that, there's only one way to make moves and improve your team, and that's via trades. I think we're going to see a very wild trade summer as well.
Do you imagine the Suns will be part of that, given what we saw play out over the last week?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here and be beat up on Suns fans, so I know don't seem to be super duper happy with some of the stuff. But I Kevin Durant he's tough, right? There's a reason why he's been on a few different teams. One of the things that goes along with that is when he gets near the end of the contract, I think as one of my friends who likes to travel, his feet start getting itchy and he wants to move. And I think that's part of what happens here a little bit is I think he all right, what's next? What do I want to do? If it's not going to happen here, where do I want to go? And I get it. I know he was presented with some, I don't know how many, opportunities actually were presented to him, but at least some, we know that for him to move in the last week, and he didn't want to do it, kind of push that out. So and we're in a spot where maybe something happens, with him. I kind of think it will, because I think the Suns and Kevin Durant are probably going to come to a mutual agreement of, all right, we tried, now it's time to move. But I'll say this, here's where I'll flip it to, let's at least look on the bright side. Doesn't mean it has to go badly, right? You could break Kevin. He makes so much money, they could break his contract up into a bunch of really helpful guys that fit better, and now you build a deeper roster. Or again, he makes so much money that you could go get superstar X that we don't even know is available. Because here's what I keep saying. One of my favorite things was, yeah, but they're not going to do that. That's now retired from my vocabulary. Luka Doncic got traded, within the last week. Anything can happen in this league.
So in that case, we were talking about being under that first or second apron and needing to fill a lot of roster spots. That could be your path to doing it while still staying in that flexibility, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You could, if you get under the second apron and you can trade Kevin Durant without, I'm not going to say no, restrictions, because there's always some. But if you traded him out and you broke up that, $50+ million contract, you break that up into 3 helpful players. I mean, look at what the Heat did. Andrew Wiggins, Davion Mitchell, and Kyle Anderson. And that was in a point where a lot harder to make trades in season. It'll be a lot easier in the offseason. Teams can go up to 21 players on their roster in the offseason. You do have teams like the Nets who are sitting there with cap space, a ton of cap space to act as facilitators. So you might be able to really turn Kevin Durant, if worst comes to worst and you got to move him, into 3, 4, 5 helpful players that could rebuild your depth here on the fly in Phoenix around what is, let's face it, still a pretty good group of guys left behind. It's not like this would be starting all over again from scratch.
All right, Keith. Last thing for me, I got to thank you and the guys over at Spotrac. The app, the Trade Machine app, has changed my life. I love it. I'm just gonna say that it was this whole week I lived on that thing, and I cannot thank you guys enough for developing that, because it is spectacular as a amateur GM and pain in the ass to everybody that loves fake trades. So
I appreciate that so much. Yeah, I never want to be part of building an app again. Like that's a process. I'll save that to the better, smarter guys than me. But yeah, we're so happy it gets so much use. We're more to come with the app. We will eventually flip it so you'll have the option to toggle into next year.
Nice.
So that if people want to start next year, but we still got to keep this year because trades can open up again when team seasons end, so they'll be able to do that. But yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. One of the best comments I got was, my family hates me because all I do, when we're anywhere, is pull this thing out and play on this app forever. So, I guess us in Candy Crush and Block Blast and all that. So, hey, we'll take it.
Oh, I didn't touch anything other than that app. So you owe my family about probably 40 hours of my life back. But you guys can download that app wherever you get them. Make sure to check it out. It is fantastic. Keith, thank you so much for joining. If you want to catch what Keith is doing, you can follow him at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter.